Welcome back, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce Tim and Nicky, who will be talking to us about myths about open source security that developers believe.
For now.
Give them a warm welcome.
G'day everyone, welcome to our talk about a few myths, just a few, that open source developers believe, brackets for now. I'm Nicky, I'm a product manager at Google.
I'm Tim, I'm a software engineer at Google.
And we work on open source dependency analysis in the coolest team, Ghost, the Google open source security team. And yes, we have stickers, come get us later. So we're gonna run through a bunch of myths that we have ourselves previously held, and that when we're chatting to folks about open source, that they might think. That's right, we're the Ghostbusters, Ghost Myth Bust. Yeah, I'm sorry, okay. So, myth number one, installing Python packages is easy and safe. All right, let's start with the easy part. You're in the right room. The easy part, okay, look, yeah, I think easy is correct. Nice work, us. We're halfway there, at least in Python. But actually, it's pretty true of most ecosystems. We're good here. All right, how about the safe part of our hypothesis? Like so many things with dependencies, the answer is, of course, it depends. It depends on what that thing that we just installed was and what it contained, what you ended up installing as a free, fun bonus thrown in, those transitive dependency steak knives. We interrupt this talk for a brief public safety reminder. It's a beautiful autumn day. You're in the office. You've just returned from a meeting when you notice a USB stick abandoned on the floor. You look at it. You look at your laptop. You leave it untouched. Some mysteries you think weren't meant to be answered. Okay, pop quiz. What's the difference between these two things? One is plugging in a mystery USB stick and the other is running npm install on a package. Well, they do have a few similarities, but actually, npm install gets run potentially as root in your data center, whereas a thumb drive is just on one developer machine. Okay, so there have been a few big name supply chain attacks over the last few years, and lots more that you might not have heard about. In fact, a few days ago, I felt compelled to update these slides with another headline and another clarification. So how risky is it? You can think of risk in two different dimensions. There's the risk of the package itself, but also how many packages there are. So first off, how many? Well, there's somewhere between 0 and a lot. How many free, as in puppies, transitive dependencies are we getting? Well, I don't know, it's hard to say. But on average, well, there are lots of different ways to measure average. And honestly, all of the ways that we tried for average ended up with the answer, it depends, but kind of a lot. In some ecosystems, more than others. Okay, so how risky is that dependency? And again, it depends. One aspect of risk, I should take this moment to say most of these images are from Emoji Kitchen. I was going to mention that at the end of the talk because now we've just lost our audience, that's fine. But how risky is this package? What is the impact? If the risk occurred, what's the probability of it happening and what's the impact of it happening? And there are lots of dimensions to this risk. Is it malware? Sure, but also do the maintainers follow best security practice or are they burnt out and susceptible to sock puppet social engineering attacks? If there are bugs, or security concerns, are they act and ideally remediated, or is the package abandoned? Is the package just new? No one really knows. Maybe it's a typo squatting attempt. Is it a package with a solid history but also with leaked or phished credentials? The package is available right now, but will it be next week? And is there an attestation available so you can be sure it's the same package that you think that it really should be? Some of these risks change based on the ecosystem. Package managers here can be a great help. Shout out to PyPI for being absolutely on the ball with some great security features. And some others you can protect against yourself when those risks matter to you. Somewhat. Okay, myth number 2. There's only one dependency graph. You may remember me from such PyCons as 2024. We calculated approximately this number, on the order of 10 to the 81, valid dependency graphs for a single dependency for D3. Okay, so that's almost the number of atoms in the universe. But good news, that number's gone up since then. That was a whole year ago. But why? Well, there are just more packages available now, which generally means a lot more options when satisfying requirements. And what do I mean by satisfying requirements? Well, you have a project, say you want to use Express, it's a minimalist web framework, it's in Node, but actually, so we've got these requirements on that package. Maybe you need it to be version 5 or above for those shiny new features. So it turns out there are 3 versions that could satisfy that constraint. Here's our situation. Your package depends on Express. It has 3 valid versions to pick from. That's not so bad. 3. Great, I can count that high. But Express has its own dependencies. For example, it depends on body parser, and there are currently around 5 versions that would satisfy that constraint, and that's a very small part of the dependency tree. So there are more layers, and each dependency on each of those layers, on each of those versions of each of those layers, and it stops becoming a tree, and very quickly, yeah, it's a mess. And if you were going to run npm install, say, a month later, it's entirely reasonable and expected that a huge part of this graph is thrown into chaos and a wildly different one emerges. Because which version actually ends up in your dependency graph depends on a lot of different things. The build tools compute the dependency graphs by evaluating constraints created by dependency requirements. I prefer version 3 or greater. Environmental constraints. This is a build for Windows. What kind of build it is, build the tests as well as the software, and perhaps build specific considerations. The binary must be minified. So a new version showing up can change the graph. A version being deleted, that changes the graph. Different tooling using UV instead of pip, or yarn instead of npm, or even just a different version of npm. One quirk I quite like, at least with npm, if you rename a package you're installing, think import foo as blah or aardvark, that can change your dependency graph because some implementations of npm resolve the dependencies in lexicographical order, which can cause requirement conflicts to resolve differently depending on which one gets evaluated first. So, where does that leave us? There is never the dependency graph. There is only ever a dependency graph on your particular machine and at your specific point in time using this specific package manager and so on. Okay. Myth number 3. Names are unique. Okay, so you've decided on a dependency. You know you want to use it, great. And you know its name and what the version that you want to use is. Go for it. Except, what was it called again? Packages by any other name might smell as sweet, but name confusion can certainly be a thorny... I'm so sorry. Okay, names are not unique, not across ecosystems, fair enough. Maybe each ecosystem really does need a Babel package, but also names might not be unique across registries and namespaces. There could be quite a few reasons for this, and some of those reasons are more problematic than others. Name squatting is essentially when someone comes along and registers a bunch of common names to sell later. It's really common with domains, social media, and also happens with package registries. I'm not sure how lucrative it is in case you're looking for a career change, but you can think of name squatting as a specific type of typo squatting. The broader concept here is that some minor mistake when you're typing the package means that the user doesn't end up with the package that they expect, they end up with your package instead. That mistake might be a genuine typos targeting a specific package, or it might be reusing the names of packages that are popular in other ecosystems, or it might just sound right, like these VS Code extensions that were all uploaded by the same malicious account and found in April this year. And of course, that's the challenge. What is legit? What seems legit? And what's safe? 2 of these are legitimate obfuscation tools that developers could use, but which 2? It's these ones, but you have no way of knowing unless you actually know. So what's a dev to do? Well, maybe Tim can find some answers.
Maybe. Be prepared for speaking rate to tone down to like 0.5.
Yeah, yeah, if you were listening to this at 2x, well, at 4, yeah, no, yeah.
So myth number 4, popular things are more secure. So you probably know a core tenet of open source is Linus's law, where given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, which is to roughly say that popular open source things are safer, right? Expectedly, it's more complicated than that. Firstly, popular things tend to be more complex. Most often, if you're writing Python packages that are popular, you're likely to be writing solutions that cater to thousands, or if not millions, of distinct users and use cases. And it happens that popular things tend to have more features, more nuanced optimizations, etc. Of course, complexity tends to mean greater attack surface, and this is sort of the inherent trade-off of using popular open source software. You get comprehensive, battle-tested solutions, but they're often much more complex and therefore greater tendency for potential vulnerabilities. Secondly, popular things are often the only thing that people even care to attack. So a tangent. When I was growing up, I thought there were only ever 2 operating systems in this world, Windows, Mac OS, and then some day in high school, a tragedy occurred, and I heard about Linux for the first time. And I genuinely heard this being lauded as one of the reasons why a person ought to consider using Linux, because supposedly it's virus-free. And I recall this was genuinely a frequently quoted benefit of using Linux for personal computing. As we all know, the statement is obviously false, but there is some truth around this idea, because Linux unfortunately never really took off as a popular operating system for desktop computing. In terms of market share, we're currently sitting at around 2%, roughly. This is 2024 data. So if you were an attacker and you wanted to distribute malicious executables, you would probably not be targeting Linux. And that happens to be a huge reason why Linux was just the more secure choice. Likewise here, I would not need to tell you which package would be more likely to be valuable to attack. Pyramid here, by the way, is another web server framework that you probably haven't heard about. It does fewer things and is expectedly less popular than Django. And so it just happens fewer people are going to care to compromise Pyramid. Okay, here's some really recent news. This landed earlier, literally just this week. What you're looking at here is a sample of a few JavaScript packages that have been released recently with a malicious change. That change, by the way, is going to drain your crypto wallet. And here are the weekly downloads for some of those packages. We're talking in the ballpark of billions of downloads, and this is in just a single 1-week period. So in addition to you as a developer needing to be security aware, the ecosystem as a whole has a responsibility to adopt strong security practices. At a minimum, think things like multi-factor authentication, package signing, etc. Sort of amusingly, between ecosystems, there's actually a surprising spectrum as to how strong their security practices are. For instance, consider this. How long is it going to take for 90% of reported malicious packages to be taken down? In other words, you report 100 packages as being malicious, how long does it take for 90 of them, roughly, to be taken down? For PyPI, the answer is roughly 24 to 36 hours. And for NPM, that figure is an order of magnitude higher. Yeah, and so this is where we give a special shout out to PyPI for actually being an outlier with how responsive they are. But even though PyPI tends to act particularly fast here, things get downloaded at such a huge scale that we are still talking about hundreds of thousands of downloads for one package in a single 24-hour period. And that's still enough to potentially produce huge impacts. So the lesson here is, the takeaway here is not to stay away from popular things. Often you don't have a choice. For instance, you should not be swearing off Python today and rewriting all your things in COBOL. The lesson is just to not blindly use popular technology expecting that it'll be more secure. There are many good angles to this, however. Like, the good thing is if you do opt to use something popular, like generally speaking, if something bad were to happen, you know many people care and they're going to act quickly, and remediations tend to come about quicker. And as you saw just then with these malicious JavaScript packages, people noticed it really quickly, they reported it quickly, and now it's being remediated quickly. If you're curious, for actual stats, it could have been much worse, but it turns out those malicious packages were downloaded roughly on the order of hundreds of thousands of times before takedown. How disastrous did this end up being? Remember, these malicious packages would drain your crypto wallet. So how much did they actually manage to steal? Current analysis shows that the attacker actually made off with a jaw-dropping $5 US. Plus a bit more in various NFTs and meme coins and whatnot. Anyway, like, we were very lucky here, but this is just another reason why popular packages get targeted. Like, you need huge volume for huge impact. Onto a different myth, open source is immutable. The packages you install today are going to be the same as the packages you install tomorrow, right? Not necessarily, because unlike other package managers in other ecosystems, pip doesn't actually make integrity checks by default. And by integrity checks, we just mean pip does not take the hash of the packages you download and check that in future times you run pip install, it remains the same. If you want that sort of thing, you should be running this command instead with the require hashes flag. And so unless you specifically opt into doing something like this, you actually just don't have a real practical guarantee you're getting the same contents as the last time you ran pip install. And here's another myth. Git tags are immutable. To remind you, Git tags are very simple. They're just like aliases for commits. That's pretty much it. We use them as a sort of human-readable bookmark for a specific commit. The convention for Python packages, as well as packages in other ecosystems, is we tend to use Git tags to point to the specific commit that a version was built at, something that looks like what you're seeing on the slides here. Anyway, a big distinction between Git branches and Git tags is that tags are not meant to be reassigned after you created them. In other words, by design, or at least by intention, they're meant to be immutable. Except, no, you can just do this. There's no magic here. You really can just drop and recreate a tag on a different commit and then push it upstream. And it feels really trivial to stand here and point out that you can do this, but the fact that you can actually has some very interesting / dire consequences to open source security. Let's put our black hats on. You have a malicious package, foo version 1.0.0, that you want to publish to users on PyPI. You can upload this to PyPI with no issues, but we have an obvious problem. Anyone who is suspicious of our malicious package can inspect our source code and they can see our wrongdoing because it's all in plain sight. So here's a trick to actually conceal our malicious code. Suppose we built and published foo version 1.0.0 at the bad commit, DEF456, and suppose we have a good commit right after. This one's completely innocent. The trick is we can move the version tag v1.0.0 from bad to good. And the clever thing here is we've moved the tag from bad to good, but PyPI is actually still publishing the bad one. And this is great because now you can shake off suspicion very easily. Like, anyone who suspects foul play, they can just audit your project at version 1.0.0 and they'll find nothing wrong. And it really is that easy, and people really do pull off this kind of exploit. If you're curious, search up the BoltDB incident. People did this for a package, and they actually had potential remote code execution over 3 years before people found out. Yep. Myth 6, Python is dead. Python 2 is dead. Yeah, like so far in this conference, it's been AI this, AI that. I don't think I've heard a single mention of Python 2, so probably safe to say it's dead. some background first. Python 2 was first released in October 2000. After 20 long years, we finally marked the end of life of Python 2 in April 2020. So it's been a good 5 years since 2020. Is it dead? Nah, Python 2 is not dead yet. It has been 5 years, but people are definitely still using it, much less actively, for sure, but definitely still in use. In fact, the percentage of people reportedly using Python 2 actually hasn't changed that much since 2020. It was sitting at around 6% then, and a year ago it was sitting at around 4%. Anyway, let's look at something more concrete, maybe. Let's look at the actual download stats from PyPI. This is a rough count of the number of packages downloaded in the last 12 months, and good news, looks like Python 2 is dead. But stretching out the y-axis a bit more, you can see there is a small but still persistent sliver remaining for Python 2. But like in relative terms, this looks okay, right? The problem is Python is the world's most popular programming language at the moment, and that tiny sliver is actually 3 billion package downloads in the past 12 months. Which is to say that nearly 20 million packages have been downloaded since PyCon started this Friday at 9 a.m. And in the time it took to deliver that sentence, another 800 or so were downloaded. Yeah, so Python 2 is not quite dead, but who cares? In general, like, why does it matter that people are using end-of-life things? It matters because when something becomes end-of-life, it means you no longer get security patches on that thing, or at least you don't reliably get them. In this case, it's been like 5 years. Python 2 and its main libraries have had ample time for many vulnerabilities to be discovered, and there's only ever going to be more over time. So what you're looking at here is just a very small sample of a few vulnerabilities affecting the Python 2 standard library, and also some cornerstone libraries like NumPy, Pillow, Django, etc. So if something gets marked end of life and that something actually matters to you and your organization, it really is best that you do something about it. And gosh, like, if only there was some kind of new industry-changing emerging technology that could solve all this without human intervention. Nicky, surely something along those lines would come and save us.
Interesting theory. If only we had... Oh, we have a myth for that. Okay, our last myth. AI will save us. Yay. But first, nostalgia story time with Nicky. So at university, I learned that computers are very, very fast. Very dumb, but very, 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 very fast. So that means they will do exactly what you tell them to and not necessarily what you want them to. And they'll do it very quickly. So now, one of those things is no longer a limiting factor. They no longer do exactly what you tell them to. But rather, they just kind of follow the vibe of it. LLMs can accelerate the generation of code. They can automate the creation of boilerplate. That's a great thing that they can do. LLMs can significantly lower the barrier to entry, maybe help onboard junior developers or even complete novices much, much faster. And that means that a lot of the tasks that traditionally might have required some critical thought no longer do. That's great, like installing dependencies. Oh, well, okay, so if we're moving from author to auditor, how closely are folks actually validating things, and do they understand it? If you are looking, if they are looking, are they just checking to see that the vibes seem right? Because AI does not solve our open source problems. It automates and accelerates human endeavors and human mistakes at industrial scale. And one of those mistakes that we've seen with our eyes on your dependencies is slop squatting. Think typo squatting, but specifically targeting AI-generated code. So specifically, an LLM model tendencies to hallucinate a non-existing package name, because it turns out that LLMs don't know what packages actually exist. They just go by their vibes and what seems right. So LLMs make stuff up. That's what a generative model is. And according to this linked study, roughly 20% of generated code samples had at least one recommended package that didn't exist. And crucially, more than half of hallucinated packages reappeared in multiple runs. So a malicious actor could pretty easily just run an LLM, find those packages that don't exist, register those package names, and upload some malicious code. And if the developers aren't paying a lot of attention to what they're actually importing, because remember that those packages look totally plausible, well, that's a bit scary. And there are other scary potential futures too. Are LLMs actually going to be great at finding 0 days in our source code? And how might we as a community meet that challenge? Many maintainers are already pretty burnt out. They're already inundated with generated PRs and security reports generated by well-meaning people. Does the future actually look like reducing our reliance on open source? How long until some CEO says, just vibe that up, the whole thing? Then we won't be relying on that one dev in Nebraska. And our code won't be open source, so we'll be protected, scare quotes intended, from those LLMs who are out there hunting for 0 days trying to hack us. But do we want that future? Do we want vibe source instead of open source? Your being here in this room demonstrates that you believe in the value of open source. We know the value of eyes on the code and the myriad other benefits that come from being part of an open source community. Well, no matter which path we go down, and I'd personally really like to avoid vibe source as a default, but hey, no matter what future, scary or not, we end up in, it looks like there'll be jobs in security. So, I'm Nicky.
I'm Tim.
And those were some myths about open source that we hope you no longer believe.
Thank you, Nicky and Tim, for the very riveting talk.
Scary?
Scary, very scary.
But a little optimistic.
Just a tiny bit.
You can all go and check out Emoji Kitchen now.
Please accept these speaker gifts
Thank you very
on
much.
behalf of the conference. Do we have any questions? We have one question over there.
Do you have any commentary on the case of releasing on PyPI with an SDIST and then at a later point in time adding a malicious wheel to the release? So, you reinstall the same version of the package, but now it contains a platform wheel that is malicious.
Yeah, that seems bad. I'm looking at Caleb in the front row saying, yes, we have comments. Come grab us afterwards, yeah.
Might have time for one short question.
You said that pip does not grab hashes by default. Do you know off the top of your head if UV does?
Yes, it does. Someone knows, and they say, yes, it does.
Great.
Any of the ones that use a lock file by default do.
Please join me again in thanking Nicky and Tim for the excellent talk.